Still on the topic types, composition, and properties of soil, part B. Now, in part A, we discussed about the types of soil and the composition of soil. In this lesson, which is the part B, we will be discussing about the properties of soil. Now, all soils contain mineral particles, organic matter, water, and air. Now, the combination of these determine the physical and chemical properties of soil. So, in this topic, we will be discussing about the physical and chemical properties of soil. And by the end of the lesson, you should be able to highlight the physical and chemical properties of soil, and you should also be able to describe the soil classification. Now, let's look at the properties of soil. The properties of soil include soil texture, soil structure, soil temperature, porosity, soil color, water holding capacity or retaining capacity, and soil pH. Now, the properties of soil can be grouped into two. We have the physical properties of soil and we also have the chemical properties of soil. Now, let's take a look at the physical properties of soil. We have the soil texture, the soil structure, the soil temperature, porosity, soil color, and water holding or retaining capacity fall under the physical properties of soil, while soil pH and cation exchange capacity fall under the chemical properties of soil. Now let's look at physical properties of soil. Starting with soil texture. What is soil texture? This refers to the relative proportion or sizes of the various particles of soil. So soil is made up of particles. Now the relative proportion, another word for relative proportion, has to do with the sizes. So the sizes of the various particles of soil is referred to as soil texture. So in other words, soil texture can be defined as the degree of fineness or coarseness of the various soil particles. Now, the particles that make up a soil sample could include gravel, sand, silt, and clay. Sand, silt, and clay are usually referred to as primary particles or the primary particles of soil. We are going to take a look now at the name and the sizes of these various soil particles. With the table below will help to have a better understanding of the various sizes and the names of the various soil particles. So let's take a look at this table. It will help us to know the names and the sizes of the various soil particles. We have the names of the particles: clay, silt, fine sand, coarse sand, and gravel. So clay, the size of clay falls below 0.002 millimeters. Silt is between 0.002 millimeters to 0.02 millimeters. For fine sand, the range of the particles in diameter is between 0.02 millimeters to 0.2 millimeters. For coarse sand, the range of the particles size is between 0.2 to 2 millimeters. And for gravel, it's above 2 millimeters. So let's look at how we can determine soil texture. So there are various ways by which the texture, which has to do with the relative proportion or size of our soil, can be determined. The first we have is by feeling. So if you want to know the type of soil that you are possessing or you have, you can just feel it. Now, how do you do this? You can take a sample of soil and rub it between your forefinger and your thumb. You know our forefinger, this is our forefinger and this is the thumb. You just rub it between. If it has a sharp feel, you know that the soil you're holding is called the sandy soil. But if it is smooth or powdery, based on what you feel, you will find that that soil is called a clay soil. So you can see the scientist who is testing to know whether it's a sandy soil or a clay soil. Another way of determining soil texture is by mechanical analysis through sieving. So when you make use of sieves with various mesh sizes, you're able to use that to determine the various sizes or separate the various sizes of a soil sample, which will now help you to place it as either fine sand, gravel, or silt, or clay soil, or sandy soil. Now, how do you achieve this? It said various sizes of fractions present in a sample of dried soil can be separated by putting the samples into a series of various measured mesh diameters and shaking vigorously. So when you take a dry soil sample, remember the soil sample has to be dried, and you place it into a series of various measured mesh diameters, and you shake it vigorously. There's a device that can be used to shake it when it's arranged. I'll show you a picture that will help us to understand. Now, when you're arranging these sieves, you start with the smallest, that's the sieve with the smallest mesh size, and progress upward to the sieve with the largest mesh size. Now, those particles, each sieve will now retain soil particles of various sizes. Now, those particles which can pass through a particular mesh belongs to the corresponding grade of soil. Now, this picture helps us to understand what I was saying. You can see the various sizes of the mesh sizes of the sieves, those with tiny holes, just of different sizes, and you can see the outcome of the soil particles that have been separated from gravel to fine sand, coarse sand, to silt and clay. Another method of determining soil texture is called sedimentation. Now, how is this achieved? You take a soil sample, you place it in a glass jar, and you add large volumes of water and mix it vigorously. Or add large volumes of water and shake it vigorously. Then you now allow it to settle. That's you keep it to stand for some time. Now, at the end, you will notice that large particles, which are like coarse sand and gravel, will settle at the bottom of the glass jar, while organic matter will float at the top. Likewise, other sizes of particles will settle. So this picture helps us to see. You can see from this picture, sand settled at the bottom, the next was silt, and the last was clay. Then on the top, you can see some organic matter that are floating at the top. Another method by which we can determine soil texture is called molding. So when you mold a soil sample after adding little water, if it's able to mold, you know that you can classify such soil sample. If it doesn't mold, you're also able to classify it. So when you take the sample, mix it with water, if the mixture is sticky, that shows that clay is present. But if it is not sticky and you cannot mold it to form a ribbon or cast, you know that that soil sample is a sandy soil. But if it can be molded into a ribbon, you know that it's a clay soil. Now, this picture helps us to understand what I'm talking about. You can see the scientists molding it to classify it as either to determine the texture, whether it's a sandy soil or a clay soil. Now, let's look at the importance of soil texture. Why is soil texture, knowing the texture of our soil, important? One is that it is useful in the evaluation of soils, the soil's ability to supply plant nutrients. So you're able to know whether it's a sandy soil or a clay soil. You know that sandy soils are usually low in nutrients. So when you're able to discover the texture determine the texture of our soil, you're able to know the level or the ability of the soil to supply plant nutrients. Now, soil texture also supports soil microorganisms, which are essential for plant growth. It also helps the farmer to know the type of soil that is in his farm land, also to know the type of crops that he can grow on his farmland. If it's a sandy soil, he will know the type of crops that are suitable for sandy soil. If it's a clay soil, he's able to know the type of crops that will be suitable for cultivating on such lands. It also helps us to determine, or the farmer to determine, the relative proportion of air and water in the soil based on the type outcome of the soil that is present or that has been determined. It also helps to determine the movement of air and water. All of these you can relate to these based on our last topic when we talked about sandy soil and clay soil. So when you're able to discover which type of soil it is, you're able to know the relative proportion of air and water in such soil. The farmer is also able to know the movement of air and water in the soil. And it also helps him to determine the type of tillage practice to be adopted. Remember, clay soils are usually heavy soils. They are sticky, you know. So he will be able to know which tillage practice to carry out in a clay soil, and tillage practice to carry out is when he has a sandy soil present in his farmland. Still on the physical properties of soil, we're going to look at soil structure. So we talked about soil texture. Now we're going to look at the soil structure. Now, what is a soil structure? This refers to the ways in which the different particles of the soil are packed or arranged. For texture has to do with the size, while structure has to do with the way the particles are arranged or packed together. Now, they said this is the arrangement of soil particles into various aggregates, sizes, and shapes to form compound particles. So let's take a look at the types of soil structure. We have, first here, we have the single grain structure. Now, the primary particles here, these particles are, they exist in single form, from the name single grain. So they exist singly, they exist in single form, they are not cemented together, and they're usually found in sandy soils. The picture can help you to have a better understanding of how it looks. We have the crumb structure. In this type of soil structure, we have large gravels or stones which are embedded or found within the primary particles, and they are cemented together. It's usually found in the topsoil. We have plate-like structure, which is also primary particles here, which are arranged horizontally and flat. They usually resemble plates or leaflets that are arranged on top of each other, and you can see from the picture there, it helps us to understand how plate-like structures of soil structures look like. They're usually found in the subsoil. Spheroidal structure, which is also called granular, is another type of soil structure. Here, the primary particles are cemented together in a circular form with a lot of air spaces, and is also found in the topsoil. We have another type of structure, soil structure, called the prismatic structure. Now, this prismatic structure could be columnar or prismatic. Now, what makes it columnar is when the top is round. So you can see the picture below. You can see the top is rounded and it has air spaces, just like the spheroidal structure we talked about. Such type of soil structure is called columnar structure. And when they are flat, they are called, just like a prism, they are called prismatic structures, and they are usually found in the subsoil. So the picture on top shows us the prismatic structure, while the picture below shows us how columnar structure looks like. Block-like structure is another type of soil structure, and here the structures could be blocky or subangular. So there are two types here. We have the blocky or the subangular, and they both usually have the size of about 10 centimeters. Now let's look at the description. When the surface is rectangular and the edges are very sharp, we have what is called a block-like structure. So it is a blocky structure when the surface is rectangular and the edges are sharp. But when the surface is rounded with no distinct edges, it is called subangular. So just take a look at the picture to help us to understand how this description of this soil structure looks like. Now, let's look at the ways of improving the soil structure. So it's important for us to understand how we can improve our soil structure. The first way is by planting of cover crops. When you plant cover crops, this helps to improve soil structure. They bind the soil particles together and helps it to retain water moderately, and this is very important in helping to improve the soil structure. Mulching is also another way of improving our soil structure, because mulching has to do with the application of some materials like polythene sheet or grasses on the surface of the land while crops are growing. This helps to retain moisture and also helps to bind particles, especially when this mulching material, if it is of plants, if it's organic like grasses, will also decompose and get diffused into the soil, which helps to improve the soil structure. Application of green manure. This can also help to improve the soil structure. While tillage practices are carried out, the grasses on the land are being tilled together with the soil. They eventually decompose and helps to improve the soil structure. Avoidance of overgrazing. When the carrying capacity of the land, the amount of animals grazed on the farmland or a ranch is more than the carrying capacity of the land, that's overstocking. This could lead to soil compaction, which destroys the soil structure, and that will encourage erosion as well. So, in order to improve soil structure, you need to avoid overgrazing. You should also avoid clean clearing with machines. That's total removal of the vegetative cover on a land. This exposes the land or the soil to the impacts of rainfall, which destroys the soil structure or could encourage erosion as well. Let's take a look at the importance of soil structure. The soil structure helps the farmer to determine the level of fertility of the soil in his farm. When the soil structure is good, it will support aeration, that's the movement of air within the soil. It also helps to prevent erosion and waterlogging. That's if the soil structure is good, erosion and waterlogging is prevented. Erosion has to do with washing away of the topsoil. Waterlogging has to do with too much water, excess water located on the farmland. So a good soil structure prevents erosion and waterlogging. And it also promotes the activities of soil microorganisms. So good structure, soil structure will promote the activities of soil microorganisms. It also helps, as a good soil structure has a good water retaining capacity. So with such a structure, you find out that if there's moderate water retaining capacity, water doesn't drain off easily, or too much water is not retained when it becomes waterlogged. So a good soil structure has a good water retaining capacity. It also supports the growth of plants. When the soil structure is good, plants grow properly. Let's take a look at soil temperature. Now, what is soil temperature? It has to do with the temperature within the soil. So this temperature is usually different from the temperature that is found above the soil. Let's take a look at the importance of temperature to crop growth. So the rate of formation and decomposition of soil organic matter is affected by temperature. So you can see that soil temperature can affect the rate of formation or the decomposition of soil organic matter. We know that organic matter has to do with plants and animal remains. So temperature can affect the rate of decomposition of plants and animal remains. Now when the temperature is low, there's also a decrease in the metabolic activities and reduction in enzymatic reactions in plants, which is very necessary for plant growth. So metabolic activities are affected, enzyme reactions are also reduced, and this will definitely affect the growth of plants. Now, when the temperature is extreme, that is excess, certain activities of microorganisms are also affected when the temperature is extreme. It can also affect the level of soil moisture. Remember, when the temperature is intense or extreme, there will be more evaporation will take place more and faster, leading to loss of moisture, which is needed for plant growth. It can also affect the absorption of water and nutrients, because when the level of evaporation is high, there will be a high loss of water, and that will affect the absorption of water. And water is also the means through which nutrients can be absorbed by plants through the roots. So you can see that temperature can affect the rate of water absorption and the nutrients available to the plants. When the temperature is optimum, there will be good seed germination. So an optimum temperature will lead to good seed germination. And an appropriate temperature can also facilitate the root development, which is important for plants to grow, because it's through the roots that plants absorb nutrients from the soil for their growth. So it's important that an appropriate temperature is made available. This will help root development. So soil temperature helps to determine the population of soil microbes. So certain microorganisms that are found in the soil, when the temperature is too high, the survival of such microorganisms are affected. So their population will be affected because of extreme temperatures. And it's also important, soil temperature also helps to determine the maturity and ripening of fruits. And it also helps or causes wilting of crops. So when the temperature is too high, crops wilt. That means they lose a lot of moisture, water, a lot of transpiration takes place, is higher. That's loss of water to the leaves of the plant is higher. Loss of water from the soil is also higher. That's evaporation takes place more. So you find out that the crops are deprived of water, which can now lead to the wilting of the crops. High temperature leads to loss of soil nutrients through volatilization. Now, what is volatilization? This has to do with the loss of nitrogen when ammonium is converted to ammonia gas. So, a high temperature can lead to loss of nutrients through volatilization. Now, optimum temperature also promotes the activities of soil microorganisms. When the temperature is optimal, you find out that the soil microorganisms can thrive properly in such an environment. High temperature may be harmful to crops by causing premature dropping of fruits. When temperature is high, fruits of our crops drop prematurely. Now let's take a look at soil pH. The word pH means pondus dehydronium, and is defined as the degree of acidity or alkalinity of the soil. It's also a measure of the concentration of hydrogen ions in the soil. So a higher hydrogen ion concentration indicates acidity, while a lower hydrogen ion concentration indicates soil alkalinity. Now, how can we determine our soil pH? There are different methods. We'll just take a look at some of the methods by which we can determine soil pH. The first here is the use of the pH scale. Now, what's a pH scale? It's just a scale that shows a range or reading from 1 to 14. It has a pointer and the figure which the pointer points to reflects the pH value. So looking at the picture there, you can see the pH scale, you can see the pointer and telling us the level of acidity or alkalinity based on the reading that is obtained. Still on the pH scale, you can see we have the readings that we can extract from this pH scale. We have a pH of 1 to 2, which is described as strongly acidic. If the pH falls within 3 to 4, we can call it acidic. If it is between 5 and 6, it's slightly acidic. But from 1 to 6.9 still falls under acidity. 7 stands for neutrality. That means a pH of 7 is termed neutral, while a pH of 8 to 14 is termed alkaline. So 8 to 9 is slightly alkaline, 10 to 11 is alkaline, and 12 to 14 is strongly alkaline. The second method of determining soil pH is by the use of litmus paper, and which is the commonest and cheapest method that exists. And how is the result interpreted when you use a litmus paper to test for pH? Now, if the litmus paper is introduced into the soil sample, changes color, or if the litmus paper, after being introduced into the soil sample, changes color to red, we can say that such sample is acidic. Now, if it's introduced into a soil sample and the litmus paper changes to blue, we can say that such soil sample is alkaline. And if the litmus paper, after being introduced into the soil sample, doesn't change color or there's no change of color, we can say that such soil sample is neutral. We still have 3 other methods by which we can determine soil pH. We have the use of the pH meter or the electrometric method, We have the dye or the calorimetric method, and we have the BDH soil test, where several chemicals like barium sulfate is used to conduct the test to determine the soil pH. Let's look at what causes soil acidity. We have leaching. Now, I explained earlier what leaching is. This has to do with the washing down of plant nutrients below the soil that's beyond the reach of plant roots. And as these nutrients are washed down beyond the reach of plant roots, hydrogen ions are left behind, and this causes soil acidity. We also have the use of acid fertilizers like ammonium sulfate, ammonium nitrate. When they are used heavily, they could also cause soil acidity. The presence of acid parent materials can also lead to soil acidity. Now, this results in the easy dissolution of rocks, and as these rocks are dissolved, it leaves behind minerals which are rich in hydrogen ions, and this causes soil acidity. Nutrient uptake by plants is also another means by which soils can become acidic. Now, the absorption of soluble minerals by plants results in the accumulation of hydrogen ions, and this accumulation of hydrogen ions also causes soil acidity. The presence of sulfur in the soil can also lead to soil acidity. Now, sulfur undergoes oxidation and dissolution, and this leads to the formation of weak acids in the soil, leading to soil acidity. Now, how can acidity of soil be removed? So let's take a look at the ways by which we can remove soil acidity. Now, this acidity in soil can be removed by the application of liming materials, and these liming materials are rich in calcium. So let's take a look at examples of some of the liming materials that can be used to control or remove soil acidity. We have limestone, which is also known as calcium carbonate. We have slaked lime, quicklime, calcium bicarbonate, wood ash, dolomite or calcite, basic slag, gypsum, and even organic manure. That's manure gotten from the remains of plants, animals, or from feces of our animals, can also be applied to the soil to help control or remove acidity from the soil. Let's take a look at the effects of soil acidity. When the soil is acidic, what are the effects on the plants or on the soil as well? Now we can see that high acidity leads to disintegration, which has to do with the breaking down of clay minerals in the soil, and these minerals are now leached from the soil. Remember, I explained what leaching is. That means washing away of these plant nutrients beyond the reach of the roots of plants. High acidity can also lead to the accumulation of aluminium and manganese. Now, when there's an accumulation of this aluminium and manganese elements or minerals, you could see it could cause toxicity to the plant roots, that they become toxic to the plant roots. That means such plants will not grow properly. High acidity can also reduce the population of some useful soil organisms. Remember, bacteria is located, there's some bacteria that are good that are located in the soil. Earthworms too are also located in the soil. And when the soil is highly acidic, the population of such organisms are reduced. Remember, bacteria is needed for fixing nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen, into the soil. Examples of such bacteria are the Rhizobium leguminosarum, Azotobacter, Clostridium. These are examples of bacteria that help fix atmospheric nitrogen into the soil. Earthworm also has a role of playing in soil formation, helping to mix soil particles together. So when the population of such organisms are affected, that will definitely affect the growth of our plants. So high acidity can reduce the population of such soil organisms. High acidity can also hinder the absorption of mineral ions. It can also cause deficiency of certain elements like calcium, phosphorus, and nitrogen. So when the soil is highly acidic, calcium, phosphorus, and nitrogen, which are macronutrients, will be deficient, which will now affect plant growth. High acidity can also reduce the activities of soil microorganisms, which is essential in soil formation and also production of certain elements or nutrients like nitrogen, as I explained earlier. High acidity can also reduce the formation of pods. Now, leguminous crops do produce pods, that's where the seeds grow. And so, if pod formation is low, that will lead to a low output from that crop farm. So, if you have a soil that's acidic, the formation of pods of legumes are usually reduced. So, let's take a look at certain crops that do well in the various types of soil. In different types of soil, we have acidic soil and alkaline soil. So, we look at crops that can still do well in acidic soil. Now, we have acidic soils have iron and aluminum which are present in large quantities, and in such cases there are certain crops that can still do well because such crops need such elements in large quantities, and so such crops can also be termed as acid tolerant crops. Examples of such crops include oil palm, swamp rice, sugarcane, maize, rubber, cocoa, banana, and plantain. So these are examples of some crops that can thrive well acidic soils, and the reason is because they need certain elements like iron and aluminum in large quantities. In alkaline soils, we have crops that can do well. There are certain crops that can do well in an alkaline soil, and examples of such crops include millet, sorghum, coconut, groundnut, cowpea, and onions. So these are certain crops that can do well in an alkaline soil. In neutral soils, which are soils that are neither acidic nor alkaline, and based on our pH scale, you understand when you have a pH reading of 7, that's a neutral soil. We have few crops that can do well there, and examples of such crops include cassava, yam, maize, potatoes, and oranges. Okay, let's take a look at the soil classification system, and here we're looking at 3 major groups of classification, and this classification is based on climate, vegetation, topography, nature of soil profile, presence of salt, and soil types. Now here the 3 classification or the 3 groups include zonal soil, intrazonal soil, and azonal soil. Taking a look at zonal soil, let's understand better what the zonal soil is. These are matured soils with a recognizable soil profile. Now, what's a soil profile? Is a vertical section showing the different layers of soil, starting from the bedrock to the parent material to the subsoil to the topsoil, which is the noticeable soil that we can see with our bare eyes. So here we have the A horizon, the B horizon, the C horizon, and the D horizon. That's a matured soil with recognizable soil profile. So zonal soils fall into this category of soils, and it's usually as a result of the influence of climate and vegetation, and it can be divided or subdivided into pedalfas, which are non-lime accumulating soils, and pedicles, which are lime accumulating soils. And examples of such pedicle soils include the podzol soil, the gray-brown soil, the chemosem soil, the xerosem soil, latosol soil, which is also called red soil. An example of such is the laterite soil, which you can find in places like Asaba. Intrazonal soil. Now, what are intrazonal soils? These are soils formed under special circumstances and conditions, such as drainage, which results in waterlogging or salt accumulation. And here we have 3 types of intrazonal soils. We have hydromorphic soils, holomorphic soils, and calcimorphic soils. Now, taking a look at the hydromorphic soil, this soil is characterized by excess soil moisture, which is as a result of waterlogging. And such soils gives rise to, or such situations gives rise to what is called the pit soils. While the holomorphic soil is a type of soil that has a high concentration of salt and is found in drier areas where there is no rainfall. And the calcimorphic soil, which is also called the calci soils, are soils that have high lime content, such as limestone. The last is the azonal soil, and this soil is formed by the nature of its parent materials rather than by climate. Remember I talked about the zonal soil, which is formed by climate, but here, a zonal soil is formed by parent material and not by climate. Now, it's a young soil and does not have any profile, and does not exhibit any profile. So the types here include the little soils, the regular soils, and alluvial soil. The types of azonal soils include, as I mentioned, the little soils are soils that are formed around mountainous areas, while the regular soils are soils that are formed on deep, soft, unconsolidated, which is also called loose areas with deposit of mineral matter. And the last here we have is the alluvial soils, which are formed through the deposit of minerals by rivers. So far, we've learned quite a lot. And just to recap on what we learned that the properties of soil include the soil texture, soil structure, soil temperature, porosity, soil color, water holding capacity, or retaining capacity, and soil pH. We also learned that the properties of soil can be grouped into two: the physical properties of soil, which include the soil texture, soil structure, soil temperature, porosity, soil color, and water holding or retaining capacity, and the chemical properties of soil, which include the soil pH and cation exchange capacity. So let's take a look at some questions that will help based on what we have learned today, and let's test our knowledge base. This question says the relative proportion of each fraction of soil in a soil sample determines its A. texture, B. structure, C. profile, D. catenary. The answer is texture, which has to do with the relative proportion of sizes of our soil particles. So the answer is A. A soil sample with a pH of 4.5 is said to be A. acidic, B. alkaline, C. neutral, D. fertile. Now from our pH scale, any value below 7 falls under acidic, increasing acidity, and any value above 7 leads to alkalinity, falls under increasing alkalinity. So 4.5 is below 7, so the answer is acidic. It's an acidic soil sample.